Well, good morning. This morning's gospel reading begins with a question. The day prior, Jesus had overturned the tables in the temple courtyard and had driven out the vendors who were buying and selling items. This morning, Jesus enters the temple and is met by a group of chief priests and elders who are questioning his authority and status. But instead of answering, Jesus poses his own question. Yet they're afraid to answer his inquiry about John's baptism, because they're afraid of upsetting the crowds or of admitting that they didn't appropriately respond to John's divinely inspired teaching, respond to his status as a prophet. So instead of answering, they tell Jesus, "We don't know." Now, first, we have to say that "I don't know" is quite often a theologically sound response to a question. After all, there are still many mysteries and concepts that lie outside of our knowledge and full understanding. This, however, was not a theologically sound response. The "I don't know" resulted from fear and was not the result of a faithful or honest quest for the truth. There's a difference between an "I don't know" based on fear and an "I don't know" that is an honest expression of the limits of our understanding and our ability. You see, fear has the ability to paralyze us and to freeze us in our tracks. I also think we have to name that our current environment is filled with fear, uncertainty, doubt, and anxiety. I think I can speak for all the clergy when I say that we have all heard you and each other voice the struggles of this time. We've heard stories of grief, most tragically grief that's frozen in time because we've been unable to fully practice and realize the funeral rituals and the celebrations that mark our loss. We've heard stories of isolation, anxiety, and stress as we adjust to this socially distanced and virtual world. Our children are struggling to learn online and are lamenting the loss of community, the loss of tradition, the loss of the rites of passage of freshman and senior years that come from these changes. Parents are struggling to homeschool and to work from home. We've heard stories of heartbreak and division from political, racial, and other divides that stoke our fears. We've heard stories of economic struggles and difficulty, and we certainly have heard of medical and health struggles during this time. And our fear and our uncertainty, we too can be stuck in the "I don't know," either afraid or too weary to take action, unwilling to take a stand. Yet Jesus, in the parable about the two sons, shows us the importance of action, and how our actions quite frequently are more important than our words and perhaps even our intentions. We hear in this parable the reminder that it isn't enough to say what we believe or what we intend to do. We must also act. It isn't enough for us to say that we love each other. We must act in ways that honor and value the inherent worth of those around us. It isn't enough for us to say that we are anti-racist. We must actively challenge prejudice and bias. It isn't enough to say that we are Christian or loving or kind or an ally to others. What matters is how we act and respond and live our lives. Are we taking action to be the change that we want to see and to be in the world? And while this parable may seem solely like an impetus or a command to labor in the vineyard, I think in the midst of this parable, we can also find a great deal of hope and good news. First, I think we have the reminder, really the reassurance that we are all called to work in the vineyard. We're being called and invited not only into relationship with God and each other, but we are being called to do the good work of the kingdom. And we have an opportunity to choose to participate in the kingdom, even if we had previously walked away or denied our opportunity. We have the ability to move away from fear and to choose love, to move away from anxiety and to choose grace, or to move away from isolation and to choose mercy and prayer and love. And even if we are so overwhelmed or frightened that we can't imagine doing this on our own, so frightened that we can't imagine doing anything, frankly, we have the opportunity to ask God and each other for help. We should never downplay the importance or the impact of being able to admit that we need support. Because even the mere act of asking for help, after all, is an action. Praying and asking for help from others further deepens and strengthens our relationships with God and with each other. Our future is filled with possibility because we have the opportunity within every moment to choose love, to choose to respond to and to accept the gift that we are being offered. Despite what we did or didn't do yesterday, or perhaps even this morning, we still have the chance to respond in this moment, at this time. And the kingdom invites us, all of us, despite our past, despite our fear or our grief. God is calling us to respond, to start anew, to live into grace and love. We're invited to remember that despite our differences and our divisions, we're all children of God, beloved of God, being called into relationship and being offered the chance to repent and to choose to work in the kingdom. But finally, we must remember that this story is ultimately about grace and love. A grace and love that is offered to all of us as God is continually calling and inviting us to respond. It's also a grace and a love that we are called to enact in the world around us. A grace and love that calls us to live and act in defiance of the fear and the divisions of the world. A grace and love that beckons us not to be afraid of the response of the crowds. A grace and love that denies our tendency to freeze and to say, I don't know. We are called to work in the vineyard, called to sow and to spread and to be love. And my prayer this morning is that all of us who are hearing this gospel lesson this morning would hear this invitation, this calling from God, this reminder that you are God's beloved and that you are being beckoned into the vineyard to do the work of the kingdom. May we all find the strength and the grace to respond with our actions. And may we all love and honor God, ourselves, and one another. Amen.